If you do a quick search for who invented the telephone, the first name you'll find will probably be Alexander Graham Bell. But the actual truth of who invented this remarkable device is a little bit murkier than that. Dig a bit deeper and you'll find a story that involves a flute-playing automaton, electric shock therapy, poverty, accusations of theft, plagiarism and falsified documents, and years of litigation. A chaotic history of men fighting for the right to be named the true inventor of the telephone. An invention that completely changed the process of how we communicate. On February 14th, 1876, Alexander Bell's lawyers submitted a patent for the telephone to the Patent Office in Washington. And right here, immediately things get messy. Because just a few hours earlier, a very similar patent had been submitted by a fellow inventor named Elisha Gray. Now, to get into just what made these patents so similar, we're going to need to get into some science. So I hope you remember what we discussed in the last couple episodes about the telegraph, because we're going to build on top of some of that. The basic question being answered by these two men was, how do we convert sound into electric current and back again? Because by now we were widely using telegraphs to transmit electric signals for communication over long distances. So was there a way to use a very similar technique to send actual sound? To explain how their solution worked, we'll follow what is likely a very similar process of thought to their own. So our first question is, what is sound? Sound is vibrations that travel through a physical medium. So to explain how that works, imagine you want to sneak up on your friend and surprise them. You carefully and quietly creep up behind your friend, and at just the right moment you shout, "Surprise!" Now at that moment, your vocal cords in your throat begin to vibrate at the varying frequencies that create the word surprise, with frequency simply being the number of those vibrations per unit of time. Now, to become a sound that can be heard by an ear, these vibrations need a medium to travel through. And unless you're underwater, that medium is probably going to be air. So these vibrations travel through the tiny air particles, causing a wave of varying frequencies that travels forward, with each vibrating particle passing their vibration onto the next, until these vibrations enter your friend's ear. There, those air vibrations hit their eardrum, which then vibrates, passing those vibrations through tiny bones to the inner ear that then converts those frequencies into a varying electric signal that their brain can interpret as the very loud word surprise, causing them to jump into the air. A simple way to experience sound creating physical vibrations is to hum with your mouth closed, and you will feel the frequencies traveling through your jaw and teeth. Or have you ever felt thunder shake the walls of your house? Big sounds create big vibrations that are strong enough to shake your walls, not just the air particles they travel through. And much like how in electricity there are materials that are insulators and conductors, different materials in our world have a varying effectiveness in carrying sound waves. Scream into a pillow in your bedroom and no one will hear you. Scream in the bathroom surrounded by hard tiles, and your neighbours 3 houses over will be calling the police. So the question is, how do we convert the varying vibrations of sound into an electric signal? Well, first, we need to figure out how to create a variation in an electric current. If we know that an insulating material allows less current through, and a conductive material allows more current through, then what if we had a way of progressively increasing or decreasing the conductive quality of a material that's part of a circuit? And this is where both Bell and Gray figured out what they called the liquid transmitter. They both had the idea for a circuit that included a thin metal rod that you could lower or raise out of a conductive liquid, and discovered that as the rod was immersed deeper, the current increased, and as it was raised up out of the liquid, the current decreased. And this was the breakthrough, because now all that was needed was to figure out how to make the rod move up and down in time with the vibrations of sound. Something that, when you consider the nature of sound, was quite simple. The final solution was this: have a funnel that the speaker talks into, and stretched across the base of the funnel is a thin membrane. So as the sound vibrations travel down the funnel, they hit the membrane and cause it to vibrate. Attached to the membrane is the thin metal rod we mentioned earlier, whose tip is immersed in liquid. As the membrane moves up and down in time with the vibrations of the sound, the metal rod also moves up and down. which causes a corresponding increase and decrease in the electric current that passes through the metal rod to an electromagnet on the receiver end. And attached to the electromagnet is a metal appendage that then vibrates up and down in response to the increase and decrease in magnetic field created by the current. And this vibration in turn sends matching vibrations through the air that are received by the listener's ear as recognizably the original words spoken. Almost shockingly simple when you break it down, and yet completely revolutionary. And when you consider that both Elisha Gray and Alexander Bell submitted almost the same idea on the same day to the patent office, you start to get an idea of the controversy that followed. So what about the flute-playing automaton, electric shock therapy, poverty, accusations of theft, plagiarism and falsified documents, and years of litigation that we mentioned at the start? Well, now that we've got the process of how the telephone actually works done, next episode we'll walk backwards from the moment of invention into the fascinating process that brought mankind to that moment, and the mess that followed after, as it began to sink in just how huge this idea was, and how confusing it became to figure out who had actually invented it.